The morning sun cast long shadows across the Naval Special Warfare Training Facility as Sarah Martinez adjusted her gear one final time. At 24, she stood barely 5 feet 4 inches tall, her frame lean but powerful from years of rigorous training. Today marked the beginning of her final evaluation phase, and she could feel the weight of countless skeptical stares from her male counterparts. Sarah had grown up in a small Texas town where her father worked as a mechanic and her mother cleaned houses to make ends meet. From an early age, she displayed an unusual combination of intelligence and physical capability that set her apart. While other girls her age were focused on typical teenage pursuits, Sarah spent her afternoons at the local gym, pushing herself through grueling workouts that would challenge grown men. Her journey to this moment had been anything but conventional. After graduating high school with top honors, Sarah had briefly considered college but felt a deeper calling toward military service. The idea of becoming a Navy SEAL seemed impossible. Women weren't even allowed in combat roles when she first enlisted. But Sarah had always been someone who saw obstacles as challenges to overcome rather than barriers to accept. The training facility buzzed with activity as dozens of hopeful candidates prepared for what many considered the most demanding military selection process in the world. Basic underwater demolition/SEAL training, known simply as BUD/S, had broken countless strong men who arrived thinking they were ready for anything. The statistics were sobering. Only about 20% of candidates who started the program would eventually earn their trident. Sarah understood these numbers better than most. She had studied every aspect of SEAL training, read memoirs of former operators, and spoken with anyone who would share insights about what it took to succeed. She knew that physical strength, while important, was only one component of what instructors were looking for. Mental toughness, adaptability, and the ability to function under extreme stress were equally crucial. As she made her way to the initial briefing, Sarah noticed the subtle but unmistakable reactions of her fellow candidates. Some stared openly, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright skepticism. Others whispered among themselves, and she caught fragments of their conversations, comments about political correctness, lowered standards, and doubts about whether a woman could handle what lay ahead. The briefing room was stark and functional, filled with metal chairs arranged in precise rows. Sarah chose a seat in the middle section, neither trying to hide in the back nor draw attention by sitting in front. She pulled out a small notebook and pen, ready to capture every detail of what would be shared. Commander James Reeves entered the room with the confident stride of someone who had spent decades in special operations. His presence immediately commanded attention, and the room fell silent. At 45, Reeves had served in multiple combat deployments and had earned respect throughout the special operations community for his leadership and tactical expertise. "Welcome to BUD/S, Commander Reeves began, his voice carrying easily through the room. "Over the next several months, you will be pushed beyond what you thought possible. Many of you will quit. Some of you will be injured. A few of you might even discover strengths you never knew you possessed." Sarah listened intently as the commander outlined the phases of training that lay ahead. The physical demands were well documented: endless runs on soft sand, ocean swims in challenging conditions, obstacle courses designed to test every muscle and joint, and the infamous log PT where teams of trainees carried heavy telephone poles through various exercises. But Commander Reeves emphasized that the physical challenges were only part of the equation. "We're not just building athletes here," he explained. "We're developing warriors who can think clearly under pressure, leaders who can make life and death decisions when everything is falling apart, and teammates who will never abandon each other no matter what the cost." The commander's eyes swept across the room, making brief contact with each candidate. When his gaze met Sarah's, she held it steadily, neither challenging nor backing down. Something in that moment registered with both of them, though neither would fully understand its significance until much later. After the briefing, candidates were divided into boat crews, small teams that would train together throughout the program. Sarah found herself assigned to Boat Crew 7, along with 5 male teammates whose backgrounds ranged from college football to construction work to previous military service in other branches. The team leader was Marcus Thompson, a former Marine who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan before deciding to pursue SEAL training. At 6 feet 2 inches and built like a linebacker, Marcus projected an image of competence and strength that naturally drew others to follow his lead. However, his initial reaction to having Sarah on his team was less than enthusiastic. "Look," Marcus said during their first team meeting, "I'm not trying to be a jerk here, but this is going to be tough enough without having to worry about carrying deadweight. Are you sure you're ready for what we're about to face?" Sarah met his question with a calm directness that surprised him. "I wouldn't be here if I wasn't ready," she replied. "But I understand your concern. How about we focus on the training and let our performance speak for itself?" The other team members, Jake Morrison from Montana, Carlos Rivera from California, Tommy Chen from New York, and David Park from Georgia, watched this exchange with interest. Each brought their own strengths and backgrounds to the team, but all shared some degree of uncertainty about how a female teammate would affect their chances of success. Their first major test came during the initial physical screening that would determine which candidates could continue with the program. The standards were clearly defined and non-negotiable: minimum times for running and swimming, specific requirements for pull-ups and push-ups, and other measures of physical fitness that had been developed over decades of training elite operators. Sarah approached each event methodically, drawing on years of preparation and an understanding of her own capabilities. During the timed run, she maintained a steady pace that kept her well within the required standard while conserving energy for the challenges that would follow. Her swimming technique was efficient and smooth, reflecting countless hours spent in pools and open water. The pull-up test proved to be where many candidates fell short, requiring upper body strength that couldn't be quickly developed if it wasn't already there. Sarah had spent extra time building this specific capability, knowing it would be closely scrutinized. As she completed rep after rep with controlled, steady movements, she could sense the attention of both instructors and fellow candidates. When the screening was complete, Sarah had not only met every standard but had exceeded most of them by comfortable margins. Her performance placed her in the top third of all candidates, a result that forced even the most skeptical observers to acknowledge her preparation and capability. But physical fitness was just the beginning. The instructors made it clear that the real challenges lay ahead, and that meeting minimum standards was only the price of admission to the actual training program. Over the coming weeks and months, every aspect of each candidate's character, determination, and ability to function under stress would be thoroughly examined. That evening, as Boat Crew 7 gathered for their first team dinner, the atmosphere was noticeably different from their initial meeting. Marcus looked at Sarah with a newfound respect, though he still harbored concerns about the unique pressures she would face as the only woman in the program. "Okay," he said, "you've proven you can handle the physical stuff. But there's going to be a lot more coming our way, and some of it might get pretty intense. Are you ready for instructors to get in your face and try to break you down?" Sarah considered the question carefully before answering. "Marcus, I've been dealing with people who doubted me my entire life. The difference here is that the standards are clear and objective. Either I can do the job or I can't. I'd rather fail because I wasn't good enough than quit because someone told me I didn't belong." Her response resonated with the team in ways that surprised them all. Each member had faced their own challenges and doubts on the path to SEAL training, whether related to background, education, or other factors that made them different from the stereotypical image of a special operations warrior. As they discussed their goals and expectations for the training ahead, Sarah began to see her teammates not as obstacles to overcome but as allies who shared her commitment to excellence. Similarly, they started to view her not as a potential liability but as someone whose determination and preparation might actually strengthen their collective chances of success. The conversation continued late into the evening, covering topics that ranged from tactical procedures they hoped to learn to personal motivations that had brought them to this point. Sarah shared stories about growing up in a family that valued hard work and perseverance, while her teammates opened up about their own backgrounds and the experiences that had shaped their desire to serve in special operations. By the time they finally called it a night, Boat Crew 7 had begun to develop the foundation of trust and mutual respect that would be essential for surviving the challenges ahead. Sarah had taken the first crucial step in proving that she belonged, but she understood that this was only the beginning of a much longer and more difficult journey. As she lay in her bunk that night, Sarah reflected on the day's events and the road that had brought her to this point. The skepticism and doubt she had encountered were nothing new, but the stakes had never been higher. tomorrow would bring new tests and challenges, each one an opportunity to prove not just her own capabilities but to challenge assumptions about what was possible for women in military service. The sound of ocean waves provided a constant backdrop to the base, a reminder of the element that would play such a crucial role in the training ahead. Sarah had always found water to be both peaceful and challenging, a medium that demanded respect but rewarded those who approached it with the right combination of technique and confidence. Her thoughts turned to the teammates who were now sleeping just a few bunks away. Building trust within Boat Crew 7 would be essential, but she also knew that her performance would be viewed as representative of all women who might follow in her footsteps. This added pressure was both motivating and daunting, but Sarah had learned long ago that external expectations could only influence her if she allowed them to. As sleep finally came, Sarah's last conscious thought was about the commander's words during the briefing. He had spoken about discovering strengths that candidates never knew they possessed. Sarah wondered what she might learn about herself in the weeks and months ahead, and whether she would prove strong enough to reach the finish line with her trident earned and her integrity intact. The facility grew quiet as candidates across all boat crews settled in for the night, each lost in their own thoughts about what lay ahead. Outside, the Pacific Ocean continued its eternal rhythm, indifferent to human ambition but ready to test anyone brave enough to enter its domain. Tomorrow would bring the real beginning of their journey toward becoming Navy SEALs, and Sarah Martinez was as ready as anyone could be for what that might require. The alarm bell's harsh clang shattered the pre-dawn silence at 0430 hours, sending candidates scrambling from their bunks in various states of readiness. Sarah had learned to sleep lightly, a skill that served her well as she quickly pulled on her training uniform and boots. Around her, the organized chaos of 30-plus candidates preparing for another day of trials filled the barracks. First phase had officially begun 3 weeks earlier, and the infamous Hell Week loomed just ahead like a storm on the horizon. Already, 12 candidates had rung the brass bell 3 times and walked away from their dreams, unable to handle the relentless pressure and physical demands. Each departure served as both a sobering reminder of the program's difficulty and motivation for those who remained. Sarah had not only survived these initial weeks but had begun to distinguish herself in ways that surprised both instructors and fellow candidates. Her performance during the timed runs consistently placed her in the top 5 overall, despite competing against men who often had significant height and weight advantages. More importantly, she had developed a reputation for never giving up, no matter how difficult the task. The boat crews assembled on the beach as the first light of dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly before them, its surface deceptively calm in the early morning stillness. Instructor Davis, a grizzled veteran with 15 years of SEAL experience, stood before them with the kind of presence that commanded immediate attention. "Good morning, ladies," Davis barked, using the deliberately provocative greeting that had become his trademark. "I hope you enjoyed your beauty sleep, because today we're going to find out which of you has what it takes to handle some real pressure." The day's evolution would involve a series of surf passages, exercises where boat crews had to navigate their heavy rubber boats through breaking waves, both launching from shore and returning through the surf zone. It was a foundational skill for SEALs, who often operated from submarines or ships offshore, but it was also notoriously difficult and dangerous for inexperienced trainees. Boat Crew 7 had developed into a cohesive unit over the past weeks, with each member learning to leverage their individual strengths while covering for teammates' weaknesses. Marcus Thompson remained the official boat crew leader, but the team had evolved into something more collaborative than hierarchical. Sarah's analytical mind and attention to detail had proven valuable in planning their approaches to various challenges. "Martinez," Instructor Davis called out, his voice cutting through the morning air. "Your boat crew is up first. Let's see if you can keep from embarrassing yourself out there." Sarah nodded acknowledgement but didn't take the bait. She had quickly learned that instructors would use any reaction, positive or negative, as fuel for increased scrutiny. The key was to remain focused on the mission while maintaining the respect due to those who had earned the right to test her limits. The crew carried their IBS, inflatable boat small, to the water's edge, where they could assess the surf conditions. The waves were running about 4 to 5 feet, not enormous, but large enough to present real challenges for crews still learning to work together effectively. Timing would be crucial, as would communication and trust between team members. "Remember," Marcus said as they prepared to launch, we stay together no matter what happens out there. If someone goes in the water, we get them back in the boat before we worry about anything else." Sarah appreciated his emphasis on teamwork, but she had already studied the wave patterns and identified what she believed would be the optimal timing for their passage. "Marcus," she said quietly, "see how there's a lull every 7th or 8th wave? If we time it right, we can use that window to get through the worst of it." Marcus looked where she was pointing and recognized the pattern she had identified. "Good eye," he acknowledged. "Tommy, you and Carlos get ready to paddle hard when Sarah gives the word." The first attempt ended in disaster, as a larger than expected wave caught them at exactly the wrong angle and flipped the boat completely over. All 6 crew members found themselves in the churning water, fighting to maintain their grip on safety lines while waves pushed them toward shore. The water was shockingly cold, even with their exposure suits, and the current was stronger than any of them had anticipated. Sarah surfaced first, immediately looking around to account for all her teammates. Training had taught her that panic was the enemy in water survival situations. Maintaining situational awareness and making rational decisions were the keys to staying alive. She spotted Jake Morrison struggling about 10 meters away and swam toward him, fighting against the waves and current. "I've got you," she called out as she reached him, using a cross-chest carry technique to help him stay afloat while they worked their way back to the overturned boat. Jake was a strong swimmer under normal conditions, but the combination of cold water, heavy gear, and disorientation had overwhelmed him momentarily. The rest of the crew managed to right the boat and get everyone back aboard, but they were now soaked, cold, and facing the prospect of having to repeat the exercise. Instructor Davis watched from shore with his arms crossed, his expression revealing nothing about whether he was pleased or disappointed with their performance. Again, he shouted across the water. "And, this time, maybe try not to swim more than you paddle." The second attempt went better, though not without challenges. Sarah's timing proved accurate, and they successfully navigated through the surf zone to reach calmer water beyond the breakers. But the return trip tested every lesson they had learned about communication and boat handling in difficult conditions. As they approached the shore, a set of larger waves began building behind them. Sarah could see the danger immediately. If they got caught by the wrong wave, they would be driven hard into the sand with potentially serious consequences for both equipment and crew members. "Hard right," she called out, recognizing that their current angle would put them directly in the impact zone. "We need to get parallel to the beach and wait for a smaller wave." Marcus trusted her assessment and echoed the command, but Carlos Rivera seemed confused by the sudden change in direction. His paddle stroke went against the rest of the crew, causing them to lose crucial momentum just as a large wave began to break directly above them. Time seemed to slow as tons of white water crashed down on their position. Sarah felt herself lifted and thrown forward as the boat disappeared beneath her. The world became a churning mixture of sand, water, and foam that disoriented her completely. Training kicked in, and she curled into a protective position while letting the wave's energy dissipate. When she finally surfaced, Sarah found herself in shallow water near the beach, with gear scattered around her and teammates emerging from the surf at various locations. The boat had been pushed onto shore and was partially filled with sand and water. More concerning, she could see that David Park was limping badly as he tried to walk out of the water. "Park's hurt," she called to Marcus, who was already moving to assist their injured teammate. A quick assessment revealed that David had twisted his ankle badly when the wave threw him into the sand, but there didn't appear to be any serious damage. Instructor Davis approached the crew as they regrouped on the beach, his expression still unreadable. Sarah expected a harsh critique of their performance, particularly the confusion that had led to their final wipeout. Instead, the instructor focused on how they had handled the emergency situation. "Martinez," he said, looking directly at her, "good recognition on that wave timing. Your crew would have been in real trouble if you hadn't called that direction change." He paused, then added, "Of course, if Rivera had been paying attention to what you were seeing out there, you might not have ended up taking a sand bath." Carlos looked embarrassed but nodded acceptance of the criticism. "I got confused by all the noise and didn't hear the command clearly," he admitted. "That's on me." Sarah could have used the moment to highlight her own performance, but instead she focused on the team dynamics that needed improvement. We all need to work on our communication in high-stress situations, she said. Maybe we should develop some hand signals as backup for when voice commands aren't clear enough. Her suggestion was practical and constructive, showing that she was thinking about team performance rather than individual recognition. Marcus appreciated the approach and immediately began discussing how they could implement better communication protocols. The remainder of the morning involved repeated surf passages, with each boat crew practicing until their movements became more fluid and coordinated. Sarah's crew steadily improved their technique, learning to read the water better and respond more quickly to changing conditions. By the final evolution, they were executing smooth launches and recoveries that drew approving nods from the instructor staff. But the real test came during the afternoon, when Instructor Davis announced that they would be conducting a surf torture exercise. This notorious training event involved lying in the surf zone while waves broke over them continuously, testing their ability to maintain composure and follow orders under extremely uncomfortable conditions. The water temperature is 54 degrees, Davis explained with obvious satisfaction. You'll be in there until I decide you've learned something about dealing with discomfort. Anyone who wants to ring the bell and end this misery is welcome to do so at any time. Sarah had heard about surf torture from former SEALs she had interviewed during her preparation. They described it as one of the most psychologically challenging aspects of training, not because it was particularly dangerous, but because it tested candidates' ability to endure prolonged discomfort while maintaining military bearing and following instructions. The boat crews entered the water together and assumed the required position, lying on their backs with arms linked, allowing the waves to break over them continuously. The cold was immediate and shocking, penetrating their exposure suits and seeming to reach directly into their bones. Each wave brought a fresh assault of frigid water that made breathing difficult and thinking clearly a constant challenge. Sarah focused on controlling her breathing and maintaining awareness of her teammates on either side. The temptation to tense up against the cold was strong, but she had learned that fighting the discomfort only made it worse. Instead, she tried to relax into the experience while staying alert for any commands from the instructors. Time seemed to move differently in the surf zone. What felt like hours might have been minutes, and Sarah found herself losing track of how long they had been in position. The cold was now deep in her core, and she could feel her fine motor control beginning to deteriorate. Around her, she could hear teammates breathing heavily and occasionally muttering under their breath. Martinez. Instructor Davis's voice cut through the sound of waves and wind. Tell me why you're here. The question came without warning, requiring Sarah to shift from the meditative state she had been using to cope with the cold into active engagement with her instructor. To become a Navy SEAL, Instructor Davis. And why do you think you deserve that privilege? Davis pressed, moving closer so that his voice carried clearly over the environmental noise. Sarah knew this was more than a simple question, it was an opportunity to either demonstrate her commitment or reveal doubts that might indicate she wasn't ready for the challenges ahead. Because I've prepared for it, I've earned it through performance, and I'll use it to serve my country and my teammates, Instructor Davis. Her response was strong and clear, delivered without hesitation despite the difficult conditions. Davis nodded slightly but continued his questioning. What happens when your teammates are counting on you and everything is going wrong? What happens when you're scared and cold and everything hurts? Then, I do my job anyway, Instructor Davis. The interrogation continued for several more minutes, with Davis probing different aspects of Sarah's motivation and commitment. Each question was designed to test not just her verbal responses but her ability to think clearly and maintain composure under stress. Throughout the exchange, waves continued to break over the entire group, adding a layer of physical challenge to the mental demands. Finally, Davis seemed satisfied with what he had heard. Boat crews, stand up, he commanded, and the candidates gratefully rose from their prone positions in the surf. As they made their way back to shore, Sarah noticed that several candidates were showing signs of serious cold stress, uncontrolled shivering, difficulty speaking clearly, and loss of coordination. The medical staff was already positioned to evaluate anyone who might need immediate attention. Tommy Chen, who had been lying next to Sarah during the exercise, leaned over as they reached dry sand. "How did you stay so calm out there?" he asked, his teeth chattering as he spoke. I kept thinking about why I'm here, Sarah replied, wrapping herself in the warming blanket that medical personnel provided. When you have a strong enough reason for doing something, you can endure a lot more than you think possible. Her words resonated not just with Tommy but with several other candidates who overheard the conversation. Sarah had demonstrated something important during the surf torture, not just physical toughness, but the kind of mental resilience that instructors were looking for in future SEALs. As the day's training concluded, Boat Crew 7 gathered for their usual debrief session. The events of the day had strengthened their bonds as a team while also highlighting areas where they still needed improvement. Sarah's performance had earned additional respect from her teammates, but, more importantly, it had shown that she could be counted on when conditions became difficult. Marcus looked around at his crew members, all of whom were still warming up from their extended time in the cold Pacific. "We're getting better," he said, "but Hell Week is coming up fast. Everything we've been through so far is just preparation for that test." Sarah nodded, understanding that the real challenges still lay ahead. Hell Week would push every aspect of their physical and mental capabilities to the breaking point, and it was where many strong candidates would finally reach their limits. But she had proven to herself and others that she belonged in this program, and that confidence would be crucial for what was to come. The evening concluded with equipment maintenance and preparation for the next day's training. Sarah took extra care with her gear, knowing that attention to detail could make the difference between success and failure in challenging conditions. As she worked, she reflected on how much she had learned about herself and her capabilities since arriving at BUD/S. The doubts and skepticism that had greeted her arrival were still present, but they were now tempered by growing respect for her performance and commitment. Sarah understood that she would continue to face additional scrutiny because of her groundbreaking role, but she also knew that every challenge she overcame made it easier for other women who might follow in her footsteps. As she settled into her bunk that night, Sarah could hear the ocean outside, its constant rhythm serving as a reminder of both the beauty and danger that awaited them in their future careers as SEALs. Tomorrow would bring new tests and challenges, each one bringing her closer to either success or failure in her quest to earn the trident. The brass bell seemed to mock them from its position near the training compound entrance as Sarah and her remaining classmates prepared for Hell Week. 5 months into BUD/S training, their original class of 58 candidates had been whittled down to 32 determined individuals who had proven they possessed both the physical capability and mental toughness to reach this critical milestone. Hell Week represented the ultimate test of a SEAL candidate's resolve, 5.5 days of continuous training with no more than 4 hours of sleep total. It was designed to simulate the extreme conditions that special operations forces might face during extended combat missions, where failure to perform could mean death for both the operator and their teammates. Sarah had spent weeks preparing mentally for this challenge, studying accounts from previous Hell Week survivors and developing strategies for maintaining focus when exhaustion made clear thinking nearly impossible. She understood that physical preparation alone would not be enough. Success would require accessing mental reserves that she might not even know she possessed. Commander Reeves addressed the remaining candidates on Sunday evening, just hours before Hell Week would officially begin. His presence lent gravity to the moment, reminding everyone that this was more than just another training evolution. This was the crucible that would separate those truly committed to becoming SEALs from those who had simply gotten lucky or worked hard up to this point. "Gentlemen and lady," the commander began, acknowledging Sarah with a slight nod, "you are about to embark on the most challenging 5 days of your lives. Many of you will discover that you are capable of far more than you ever imagined. Others will find that their breaking point comes sooner than expected." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "Remember that Hell Week is not designed to break you physically, although it will certainly test your body's limits. It is designed to reveal your character, to show whether you have the inner strength necessary to lead men and women in combat when everything is falling apart around you." Sarah listened intently, knowing that the commander's words contained wisdom earned through decades of experience in the most demanding military operations. She had studied his background and knew that he had led SEAL teams through some of the most challenging missions of the past 2 decades. The evolution began at midnight with chaos and confusion deliberately designed to disorient the candidates. Air horns blared, instructors shouted contradictory commands, and boat crews were ordered to perform tasks that seemed impossible under the circumstances. The goal was to create immediate stress and identify candidates who might panic or freeze when faced with overwhelming pressure. Boat Crew 7 had developed contingency plans for exactly this type of situation, but the reality proved more challenging than their preparation had anticipated. In the darkness and noise, it was difficult to maintain communication or even locate all team members. Sarah found herself separated from Marcus and the others during the initial confusion, forced to make quick decisions about whether to complete assigned tasks individually or spend precious time reuniting with her crew. She chose to focus on the immediate mission, trusting that her teammates were doing the same and that they would regroup when the situation allowed. The task assigned to her involved carrying a heavy ammunition can through an obstacle course while crawling under barbed wire, a seemingly simple challenge that became exponentially more difficult when performed in darkness while instructors screamed instructions and corrections. Sarah's approach was methodical and efficient, drawing on months of training to maintain proper form even when fatigue and stress made shortcuts tempting. She completed the evolution within the required time standard, but, more importantly, she demonstrated the kind of calm focus under pressure that instructors were looking for in future team leaders. The first 24 hours blurred together in a series of physical challenges, mental tests, and sleep deprivation that pushed every candidate to their limits. Boat crews carried heavy logs through soft sand, performed endless sets of calisthenics in the surf zone, and navigated complex obstacle courses while instructors provided a constant stream of criticism and additional challenges. By Tuesday morning, 3 more candidates had rung the bell and walked away from their dreams. The departures were particularly difficult to watch because they involved individuals who had performed well throughout the earlier phases of training. Hell Week had a way of revealing weaknesses that hadn't been apparent during less extreme conditions. Sarah noticed changes in her own mental state as sleep deprivation accumulated and physical fatigue deepened. Tasks that had seemed routine during regular training now required concentrated effort to complete correctly. Simple calculations became challenging, and maintaining awareness of her teammates and surroundings required conscious effort rather than happening naturally. But she also discovered reserves of determination that surprised her. When instructors screamed at her to move faster or work harder, she found herself responding with increased effort rather than defensive reactions. When teammates struggled with their assigned tasks, she instinctively moved to assist them even when doing so meant additional work for herself. The halfway point of Hell Week arrived with a notorious evolution known as Steel Pier, an extended session of calisthenics performed on the cold metal structure extending into San Diego Bay. Candidates were required to perform hundreds of repetitions of various exercises while soaked by spray from the bay and chilled by ocean breezes. Sarah had lost track of how many push-ups, sit-ups, and flutter kicks she had completed when instructor Davis appeared beside her with a familiar expression of skeptical evaluation. Throughout Hell Week, he had continued to pay special attention to her performance, sometimes seeming to look for signs of weakness and other times appearing genuinely curious about her capabilities. "Martinez," Davis said, his voice cutting through the sound of wind and water, "you've made it further than most people thought you would. But we're not even halfway done yet. How do you feel right now?" The question seemed designed to elicit either overconfidence or admission of weakness, both responses that could be used against her if she wasn't careful. Sarah considered her answer while continuing to perform the assigned exercises, maintaining the rhythm that had kept her going for the past 3 days. "I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, Instructor Davis," she replied, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "Ready for whatever comes next." Davis studied her for several moments, perhaps looking for signs that her confidence was genuine rather than bravado designed to impress him. What he saw was a candidate who had been tested extensively and had responded by becoming stronger and more focused rather than gradually breaking down. "We'll see about that," he said finally, but there was something in his tone that suggested growing respect rather than continued skepticism. The evolution continued for another hour, with candidates performing exercises until their muscles screamed in protest and their lungs burned from the effort. Sarah maintained her form and pace throughout, drawing on visualization techniques she had developed during her preparation. She imagined herself in combat situations where her teammates' lives depended on her ability to perform when everything hurt and nothing seemed to work correctly. Wednesday night brought one of the most challenging tests of the entire week, a long boat paddle in heavy seas that would test both individual endurance and crew coordination when everyone was operating on minimal sleep and maximum stress. The Pacific Ocean was running 8 to 10 foot swells, creating conditions that would be challenging for experienced boat crews operating at full strength. Boat Crew 7 launched their IBS into the churning water with the precision that had developed over months of training together. But the reality of paddling through large waves while exhausted quickly tested every lesson they had learned about teamwork and communication. Sarah found herself in the bow position, responsible for calling out wave timing and helping to navigate their course through the surf zone and into open water. The position required constant attention and decision-making at a time when her mind felt foggy from sleep deprivation and accumulated fatigue. "Big set coming in from the right," she called out, spotting a series of waves that could either help them make progress toward their objective or swamp their boat if they approached it incorrectly. "We need to angle left and hit it head-on." Marcus acknowledged her call and adjusted their heading, trusting her assessment even though his own view from the stern was limited. The trust that had developed within their crew over months of training now proved crucial, as each member had to rely on teammates' judgment when their own decision-making abilities were compromised by exhaustion. The paddle evolution lasted 4 hours, taking them several miles offshore and back through conditions that would have been challenging for fresh crews in daylight. Throughout the journey, crew members took turns struggling with fatigue, seasickness, and the constant physical demands of maintaining their boat's position and progress through the waves. At one point, Carlos Rivera began showing signs of heat exhaustion despite the cold conditions, becoming disoriented and unable to maintain his paddle rhythm. Sarah immediately recognized the symptoms and worked with Tommy Chen to redistribute Carlos's workload while keeping him functional enough to avoid medical evacuation. "Stay with us, Carlos," Sarah said, using a firm but encouraging tone that cut through his confusion. "We're going to get through this together, but we need you to keep working." Her leadership in that moment impressed not just her immediate teammates but other crew members who witnessed her response to the emergency. Sarah had stepped up naturally when the situation required it, demonstrating the kind of instinctive leadership that instructors looked for in candidates who might someday lead real combat missions. The boat crews finally returned to shore as dawn was breaking on Thursday morning, marking the beginning of the final stretch of Hell Week. Candidates were now operating on less than 3 hours of sleep accumulated over 4 days, and the effects were visible in their movements, reactions, and decision-making processes. Sarah noticed that her own coordination was significantly impaired. Tasks that had been automatic now required conscious effort and concentration. But she also observed that her mental clarity seemed to improve when situations became most challenging, as if the extreme conditions triggered some kind of survival response that helped her focus despite the accumulated fatigue. The final day of Hell Week included a series of evolutions designed to test candidates' ability to function as leaders and teammates when operating at the very edge of their capabilities. Boat crews were assigned complex missions that required planning, coordination, and execution under time pressure while dealing with equipment failures and changing conditions. Sarah found herself designated as crew leader for one of these final evolutions, a responsibility that required her to coordinate her team's efforts while maintaining awareness of the bigger picture and adapting to challenges that arose during execution. The task involved moving heavy equipment across difficult terrain while maintaining security and meeting specific time requirements. Her approach was characteristic of everything she had learned during her months at BUD/S, careful planning combined with flexibility when circumstances changed, clear communication with team members, and willingness to take personal risks when necessary to ensure mission success. She led from the front during the most difficult portions of the movement while ensuring that struggling teammates received the support they needed. The evolution concluded successfully, with Boat Crew 7 completing all assigned tasks within the required time limits despite facing several unexpected challenges. As they prepared for what would be the final test of Hell Week, Sarah reflected on how much she had learned about her own capabilities and about the kind of leader she wanted to become. The bell that had mocked them throughout the week now seemed less threatening, not because the challenges had become easier but because Sarah had proven to herself that she possessed the inner strength necessary to continue regardless of how difficult things became. She understood that Hell Week was ending, but she also knew that the real test of her commitment to becoming a SEAL was just beginning. Friday evening arrived with the traditional securing from Hell Week ceremony, where surviving candidates were recognized for their achievement and welcomed into the next phase of their training. Commander Reeves addressed the group, which now numbered 26 individuals who had proven they possessed the fundamental qualities necessary to continue toward earning their trident. "You have accomplished something remarkable this week," the commander said, his voice reflecting genuine respect for what the candidates had endured. "You have discovered that your limits are far beyond what you previously thought possible, and you have learned that you can depend on your teammates even when everything seems hopeless." He paused to make eye contact with each surviving candidate, including Sarah, who stood with her boat crew feeling exhausted but deeply satisfied with her performance. "But Hell Week is just the beginning. The training ahead will test different aspects of your character and capabilities, and you will need to continue growing and learning if you want to earn the right to call yourself a Navy SEAL." Sarah understood that the commander's words were both congratulations and warning. Hell Week had proven that she belonged in the program, but it had also demonstrated that the challenges ahead would require continued dedication and growth. She looked forward to those challenges with the confidence that comes from surviving the ultimate test of one's resolve. As the ceremony concluded and candidates were finally released to get some much-needed rest, Sarah reflected on the week that had changed her understanding of her own capabilities. She had proven not just to others but to herself that she could perform at the highest levels when everything was on the line. More importantly, she had demonstrated the kind of character and leadership that would be essential for success in the operational SEAL teams that represented her ultimate goal. The journey toward earning her Triton was far from over, but Hell Week had provided the foundation of confidence and self-knowledge that would carry her through whatever challenges lay ahead. Sarah Martinez was no longer just a candidate hoping to become a SEAL. She was a proven warrior who had earned her place among America's elite special operations forces. The dive tower stood like a monument to human endurance against the California sky, its imposing structure marking the beginning of second-phase training. Sarah Martinez adjusted her diving equipment one final time, checking seals and connections with the methodical precision that had become second nature over the past 8 months of BUD/S training. Around her, 26 survivors of Hell Week prepared for what many considered the most technically demanding portion of their journey toward becoming Navy SEALs. Second phase would test an entirely different set of skills than the raw physical and mental toughness that had carried them through first phase. Now they would learn to operate underwater with complex life support systems, master the art of combat swimming, and develop the technical expertise that would allow them to infiltrate enemy positions from beneath the surface of lakes, rivers, and oceans around the world. Sarah had spent countless hours studying diving physiology, equipment maintenance procedures, and underwater navigation techniques in preparation for this phase. She understood that technical precision would be just as important as physical conditioning. A single equipment malfunction or procedural error could mean death in the unforgiving underwater environment where SEALs conducted many of their most critical missions. The Draeger rebreather system she would be using represented some of the most sophisticated underwater breathing equipment in the world. Unlike traditional scuba gear that released bubbles to the surface, the Draeger recycled exhaled breath through a complex chemical process that allowed swimmers to remain completely submerged without leaving any trace of their presence. Mastering this system would be essential for the covert operations that define much of SEAL mission profiles. Instructor Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez had 15 years of operational experience with SEAL Team 3, including multiple combat deployments where his life had depended on exactly the skills he would be teaching. His reputation for demanding perfection was legendary among BUD/S candidates, and Sarah knew that his evaluation of her performance would be crucial for her advancement through the program. Martinez, Chief Rodriguez called out as the class assembled for their first major diving evolution, "I want you to demonstrate proper equipment inspection procedures for the rest of the class. Take your time and make sure you explain each step clearly." Sarah recognized the instruction as both an opportunity to show her technical knowledge and a test of her ability to teach complex procedures to her teammates. She approached the task systematically, beginning with visual inspection of all external components before moving through the detailed checks that would ensure her equipment would function properly throughout the dive. "First, we inspect the breathing bag for any signs of wear or damage," she explained, running her hands carefully over the rubber surface while her classmates watched. "Even a tiny hole can cause catastrophic failure once we're underwater, so we need to be absolutely thorough." Her explanation continued through every component of the system: the carbon dioxide scrubber that would remove poisonous gases from her exhaled breath, the oxygen sensors that would monitor life support levels, and the complex valves and regulators that controlled gas flow throughout the system. Each step was demonstrated with the kind of attention to detail that could mean the difference between mission success and disaster. Chief Rodriguez observed her presentation with growing approval, recognizing the depth of preparation and understanding that Sarah had brought to this critical phase of training. When she concluded her demonstration, he addressed the entire class with an emphasis that left no doubt about the importance of what they were learning. "This is what right looks like," he said, gesturing towards Sarah's equipment layout. "Every single one of you needs to approach equipment preparation with exactly this level of care and precision. In the teams, your teammates are counting on you to get it right every time, and there are no second chances when you're operating in a combat environment." The first pool session introduced candidates to the basics of underwater operations with their new equipment. Sarah had always been comfortable in the water, but swimming with the Draeger system required learning entirely new techniques for maintaining buoyancy, navigating without visual references, and communicating with teammates through hand signals and physical contact. The pool evolution began with simple underwater swimming exercises designed to help candidates become familiar with their equipment while building confidence in the system's reliability. Sarah moved through the water with smooth, efficient strokes that minimized energy expenditure while maintaining steady progress toward her assigned objectives. But the real challenge came when Chief Rodriguez introduced equipment failures and emergency scenarios designed to test candidates' ability to respond appropriately when things went wrong. Sarah found herself dealing with simulated carbon dioxide poisoning, oxygen sensor failures, and breathing bag malfunctions that required quick thinking and precise responses to avoid actual danger. During one particularly challenging scenario, Sarah was swimming underwater when her breathing bag suddenly began flooding with pool water, simulating a catastrophic seal failure that could occur during actual operations. The procedure for dealing with this emergency required maintaining calm while executing a complex sequence of valve operations and equipment switches that would restore life support capabilities. Sarah felt the cold shock of water entering her breathing system, but her training immediately took over. She stopped forward movement to conserve oxygen, switched to her backup breathing system, and began the prescribed emergency procedures while maintaining awareness of her position and the location of safety divers positioned around the pool. The entire emergency lasted less than 2 minutes, but it required the kind of clear thinking under stress that could only be developed through realistic training. When Sarah surfaced at the designated recovery point, Chief Rodriguez was waiting with an expression that showed both approval and continued assessment of her capabilities. "Good response time and proper procedure," he said, making notes on his waterproof evaluation sheet. "But I noticed some hesitation during your initial reaction to the flooding. In a real situation, that delay could cost you valuable time and oxygen." Sarah absorbed the feedback without defensiveness, understanding that the chief's critique was designed to help her improve rather than to highlight failures. "Roger, Chief. I'll work on making my emergency responses more automatic during the next session." The pool training continued for 3 weeks, with each session building complexity and adding new challenges that tested different aspects of underwater operations skills. Sarah consistently performed at the top of her class, but, more importantly, she developed a reputation for helping struggling classmates master the technical skills that were proving difficult for some candidates. Marcus Thompson, her former boat crew leader, was having particular difficulty with buoyancy control, a critical skill that allowed divers to maintain precise depth while moving through the water. Sarah noticed his struggles during a complex navigation exercise and positioned herself nearby to provide guidance without interfering with his individual evaluation. "Try adjusting your weight distribution toward your feet," she whispered during a brief surface interval. "Your nose heavy, which is why you keep diving deeper than intended." Marcus followed her suggestion during the next portion of the exercise, and his buoyancy control immediately improved. The change allowed him to complete the navigation course within the required time standard, avoiding what could have been a failing grade on a critical evolution. Sarah's willingness to help teammates succeed, even when doing so required additional effort on her part, impressed both instructors and fellow candidates. She understood that the SEAL teams operated on principles of mutual support and collective success, and that her own advancement meant nothing if her classmates failed to develop the skills necessary for operational effectiveness. The transition from pool training to open ocean diving represented a quantum leap in difficulty and danger. The Pacific Ocean off the coast of San Diego presented challenges that no amount of pool training could fully simulate: strong currents, limited visibility, marine life encounters, and constantly changing conditions that required adaptability and sound judgment. Sarah's first open ocean dive took place in 30 feet of water off Mission Beach, where decades of SEAL training had created an underwater obstacle course known to generations of candidates. The mission required her to navigate to a series of underwater checkpoints while maintaining depth control and avoiding detection by surface observers. The ocean environment was immediately more challenging than anything she had experienced in the controlled conditions of the training pool. Surge from surface waves created constant motion that affected her buoyancy and navigation, while the reduced visibility meant she had to rely more heavily on compass bearings and elapsed time calculations to reach her objectives. Sarah approached the dive methodically, taking extra time during her equipment checks to ensure everything was properly configured for the more demanding conditions. She had studied tide charts, current predictions, and weather forecasts to understand what environmental factors might affect her dive plan. The descent went smoothly, but Sarah immediately noticed how different the ocean felt compared to the static pool environment. The water was colder, requiring her to manage the additional thermal stress while maintaining focus on navigation and depth control. Marine life was abundant, including curious sea lions that seemed fascinated by the strange bubble-less intruders in their domain. Navigation to the first checkpoint required precise compass work and careful monitoring of elapsed time, as the underwater landmarks were subtle and could easily be missed in the limited visibility. Sarah had practiced these skills extensively in the pool, but the real ocean tested her ability to maintain accuracy while dealing with surge, current, and the psychological pressure of operating in an environment where mistakes could have serious consequences. She reached the first checkpoint exactly on schedule, confirming her position by locating the concrete training aid that marked the designated location. The success built her confidence for the more challenging navigation legs that lay ahead, but Sarah remained focused on methodical execution rather than allowing overconfidence to compromise her technique. The second checkpoint required a compass bearing that would take her through a kelp forest, an environment that presented unique challenges for combat swimmers. The kelp fronds created an underwater jungle that could easily disorient divers while also providing concealment from surface detection. Sarah had to balance the tactical advantages of using kelp for cover against the navigation challenges it presented. Moving through the kelp required different swimming techniques than she had used in open water. Sarah modified her fin kicks to avoid becoming entangled while maintaining the steady progress necessary to stay on schedule. The experience was both beautiful and challenging, as shafts of sunlight filtering through the kelp created an otherworldly environment unlike anything she had experienced during her preparation for SEAL training. The final checkpoint was located in deeper water, requiring Sarah to manage the physiological effects of increased pressure while maintaining the precision necessary to locate a target that measured less than 2 meters in diameter. The descent to 40 feet created noticeable changes in her buoyancy and breathing gas density that required conscious compensation to maintain proper technique. Sarah located the final checkpoint with minimal searching, demonstrating the navigation skills that would be essential for real-world infiltration missions. But the dive wasn't complete until she successfully returned to the extraction point within the time limit while avoiding detection by instructors positioned to simulate enemy sentries. The return journey tested her stamina and equipment management as the accumulated effects of cold water, physical exertion, and breathing gas consumption began to impact her performance. Sarah maintained her discipline and technique throughout, arriving at the extraction point with adequate air reserves and no equipment problems. When she surfaced at the designated recovery location, Chief Rodriguez was waiting with his evaluation sheet and an expression that revealed growing respect for her capabilities. Clean navigation, good time management, and proper procedures throughout, he said, marking scores that would place her among the top performers for the evolution. But the chief's next words carried additional significance that extended beyond just technical evaluation. "Martinez, you're developing into exactly the kind of operator we need in the teams, someone who can handle complex missions while helping teammates succeed. Keep up the good work." The recognition meant more to Sarah than any individual achievement, because it indicated that she was being viewed not just as a capable candidate but as someone who embodied the leadership qualities that defined the most effective SEAL operators. She had proven that her commitment extended beyond personal success to include the collective effectiveness that would be essential in operational environments. As second-phase training continued through increasingly challenging diving evolutions, Sarah continued to distinguish herself through technical competence, tactical awareness, and dedication to team success. She mastered long-distance underwater navigation, learned to operate effectively in zero-visibility conditions, and developed the kind of underwater combat swimming skills that would allow her to infiltrate heavily defended objectives. But, perhaps most importantly, Sarah had established herself as someone her instructors and classmates could depend on when conditions became most challenging. She had proven that her presence in the program made everyone around her better, and that her commitment to excellence extended beyond individual achievement to include the collective success that defined the SEAL ethos. The completion of second phase marked another crucial milestone in Sarah's journey toward earning her trident, but it also represented the beginning of an even more demanding test of her skills and character. Third phase would teach her the combat skills and tactical expertise that would allow her to lead men and women in the most dangerous special operations missions, and Sarah approached the challenge with the confidence that comes from having proven herself capable of succeeding at the highest levels of military training. As she prepared her equipment for storage after the final second phase evolution, Sarah reflected on how much she had grown since arriving at BUD/S nearly a year earlier. The doubts and skepticism that had initially greeted her presence were now largely replaced by respect and acceptance based on demonstrated performance. She had proven that she belonged not just in the program but among the elite operators who would carry on the SEAL tradition of excellence in service to their country. The sound of live ammunition whistling overhead had become oddly comforting to Sarah Martinez as she low-crawled through the dirt during the final training exercise of third phase. After 18 months of the most demanding military training in the world, she was less than 72 hours away from earning the Navy SEAL trident that had seemed like an impossible dream when she first arrived at BUD/S. The culminating field training exercise represented everything Sarah had worked toward since deciding to pursue special operations. She and her remaining 21 classmates were executing a complex multi-day mission that would test every skill they had learned, from underwater infiltration and land warfare to demolitions and combat leadership under the kind of realistic conditions they would face as operational SEALs. Sarah found herself designated as patrol leader for the mission's most critical phase, responsible for coordinating a nighttime assault on a heavily defended objective while managing casualties, equipment failures, and the kind of unexpected challenges that define real combat operations. The weight of that responsibility felt both daunting and natural after the gradual progression of leadership opportunities she had earned throughout her training. Commander Reeves observed the exercise from a position that allowed him to evaluate both individual performance and team dynamics as the candidates executed their mission under realistic combat conditions. Over the past months, he had watched Sarah develop from a determined but untested candidate into someone who embodied the leadership qualities that the SEAL community valued most highly. The mission began at 0200 hours with an underwater approach to the objective, requiring Sarah to lead her patrol through 2 kilometers of ocean swimming while maintaining navigation accuracy and operational security. The skill she had mastered during second phase now proved essential as she guided her team through dark water toward an enemy position that was actively searching for infiltrating forces. Sarah's navigation was precise, bringing the patrol to within 50 meters of the planned insertion point despite challenging conditions that included strong currents and limited visibility. Her team emerged from the water on schedule and began the transition to land operations that would test their ability to coordinate movement, communications, and fire support while advancing toward their objective. The patrol moved inland through terrain that had been designed to challenge every aspect of their tactical training. Sarah positioned herself where she could maintain visual contact with all team members while observing the objective and making the split-second decisions that would determine mission success or failure. When her point man signaled contact with enemy forces, Sarah immediately began implementing the battle drills they had practiced countless times during training. Her commands were clear and decisive, directing her teammates to positions that would allow them to gain fire superiority while minimizing their exposure to enemy observation and fire. Alpha Team, move to that ridgeline and establish overwatch, she commanded, her voice calm despite the controlled chaos erupting around their position. Bravo Team, flank left and prepare to assault on my signal. The exercise scenario included realistic casualties that tested Sarah's ability to maintain mission focus while ensuring that injured team members received appropriate medical attention. When Marcus Thompson went down with a simulated leg wound, Sarah had to decide whether to continue the assault or modify her plan to accommodate the tactical situation. Her decision reflected the kind of mature judgment that instructors looked for in candidates who would someday lead actual combat missions. Sarah assigned 2 team members to provide medical aid and security for Marcus while continuing the assault with her remaining forces. The choice demonstrated her understanding that mission accomplishment and troop welfare were both essential responsibilities of military leadership. The assault phase tested every combat skill Sarah had learned during third phase training. She coordinated supporting fires, directed team movement through complex terrain, and made real-time adjustments to her plan as the tactical situation evolved. Her performance reflected not just technical competence but the kind of tactical intuition that could only be developed through realistic training under stress. When the objective was finally secured, Sarah immediately began the actions necessary to consolidate her position and prepare for potential counterattack. She established security, organized casualty evacuation, and coordinated with higher headquarters to report mission completion and request extraction support. Commander Reeves approached Sarah's position as the exercise concluded, his expression reflecting the kind of professional satisfaction that came from watching a candidate exceed expectations during their most challenging test. Throughout the 18-month training process, he had observed Sarah's steady development from someone who had to prove she belonged into a leader who made everyone around her more effective. Outstanding leadership during a complex tactical situation, the commander said, making notes on his evaluation form. Your decision-making under pressure and ability to adapt to changing conditions are exactly what we're looking for in our junior officers. Sarah felt a sense of deep satisfaction at the commander's recognition, but she also understood that her individual performance was inseparable from her team's collective success. The patrol had accomplished its mission because every member had contributed their expertise and determination to overcome the challenges they had faced. The final week of BUD/S included administrative processing, equipment turn-in, and preparation for the graduation ceremony that would mark the official completion of basic SEAL training. But Sarah knew that earning her Trident would represent the beginning rather than the end of her journey toward becoming an operational SEAL. The graduation ceremony took place on a sunny Friday morning, with families, friends, and distinguished guests gathering to witness the culmination of one of the most challenging training programs in the world. Sarah's parents had traveled from Texas to see their daughter achieve something that had seemed impossible when she first announced her intention to pursue special operations. Commander Reeves delivered the keynote address, emphasizing the responsibilities that came with wearing the SEAL Trident and the expectations that the Naval Special Warfare community would have for the new graduates as they joined operational teams around the world. Today marks the end of your training and the beginning of your service as Navy SEALs, the commander said, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. You have proven that you possess the technical skills, physical capabilities, and mental toughness necessary to succeed in the most demanding military operations. But your real test will come when you join your teams and begin the work of defending our nation and its interests. When Sarah's name was called, she walked forward with the confidence and bearing that had been forged through months of the most challenging training imaginable. As Commander Reeves pinned the gold trident to her uniform, she felt the weight of both achievement and responsibility that would define the rest of her military career. The trident represented more than just personal accomplishment, it symbolized acceptance into a brotherhood of warriors who had proven themselves capable of succeeding where others had failed. Sarah understood that she would now be held to the same standards as every SEAL who had earned the right to wear the insignia, and that her performance would be measured by her contribution to mission success rather than by the barriers she had overcome to reach this point. After the ceremony, Sarah was approached by several senior SEALs who had observed her training and wanted to congratulate her on completing the program. Their recognition meant more than any official award because it came from operators who had proven themselves in combat and who understood what it took to succeed in the teams. Master Chief Petty Officer Williams, a legendary operator with over 20 years of SEAL experience, pulled Sarah aside for a conversation that would prove influential in shaping her understanding of what lay ahead. You've accomplished something remarkable here, the Master Chief said, his tone reflecting genuine respect for what Sarah had achieved. But I want you to understand that the real work is just beginning. In the teams, you'll be expected to perform at this level every day while continuing to grow and develop as an operator and leader. Sarah listened carefully, understanding that the Master Chief's words contained wisdom earned through decades of operational experience. She had proven that she could succeed in training, but she still needed to demonstrate that she could contribute effectively to real-world missions where the stakes would be measured in lives rather than training scores. The Master Chief continued, emphasizing the unique position Sarah would occupy as the first woman to complete SEAL training. "You're going to face additional scrutiny and pressure because of your groundbreaking role," he said. "But if you continue to focus on excellence and team success, you'll find that the operators who matter most will judge you by your contributions rather than your background." Sarah appreciated both the recognition and the realistic assessment of what she could expect in her new role. She understood that earning her Trident was just the first step in a career that would require continuous growth and adaptation to meet evolving challenges and responsibilities. Her first assignment would be to SEAL Team 5, based in Coronado, California, where she would undergo additional training specific to the team's mission set before deploying on actual operations. The team was known for its high operational tempo and demanding standards, making it an ideal place for a new SEAL to develop the experience and expertise necessary for advancement within the special operations community. As Sarah prepared to leave the training command and report to her new team, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The skepticism and doubt that had greeted her arrival at BUD/S had been replaced by respect earned through demonstrated performance under the most challenging conditions imaginable. She had proven not just to others but to herself that she possessed the physical capabilities, mental toughness, and leadership qualities necessary to succeed as a Navy SEAL. More importantly, she had shown that her presence in the program had made everyone around her better, fulfilling the fundamental SEAL principle that individual excellence must contribute to team success. The doubters who had questioned whether a woman could meet SEAL standards had been proven wrong not through political arguments or regulatory changes, but through the most objective measure possible, successful completion of training that had been unchanged to accommodate her participation. Sarah had met every standard, overcome every challenge, and earned her place among America's most elite warriors through merit alone. But Sarah also understood that her achievement would be meaningful only if it led to continued excellence in operational assignments. The trident on her uniform represented potential that would need to be proven again and again through mission success and professional growth over the course of her career. As she packed her belongings for the move to SEAL Team 5, Sarah thought about the young women who might someday follow the path she had pioneered. Her success had opened a door that had been closed for decades, but maintaining that opportunity would require sustained excellence from everyone who walked through it. The final entry in Sarah's training journal captured both her sense of achievement and her commitment to the responsibilities that lay ahead. "Today I earned the right to call myself a Navy SEAL. Tomorrow I begin the work of proving that this honor was deserved through service to my country, my teammates, and the mission." The doubters have been silenced, but the real test is just beginning. Commander Reeves watched from his office window as Sarah loaded her car and prepared to drive to her new assignment. In nearly 2 decades of training SEAL candidates, he had seen many remarkable individual achievements, but Sarah's completion of the program represented something more significant than personal success. She had proven that excellence was not limited by traditional boundaries, and that the SEAL community could maintain its standards while expanding its definition of who could meet those standards. Her success would influence policy decisions, training modifications, and operational assignments for years to come. But, more immediately, Commander Reeves knew that Sarah Martinez was ready to contribute to the mission of naval special warfare as a fully qualified operator who had earned her place through demonstrated competence rather than accommodation. She would face continued challenges and scrutiny, but she had proven that she possessed the character and capabilities necessary to succeed at the highest levels of military service. The SEAL Trident that Sarah now wore represented not just personal achievement but a new chapter in the history of America's most elite military units. She had proven that barriers once thought insurmountable could be overcome through preparation, determination, and unwavering commitment to excellence. The doubters who had scoffed at her marks had been proven wrong through the most objective measure possible: mission accomplishment under the most demanding conditions imaginable.